Hello, everybody. It's Uncle John from Your Story Hour, and I'm here to bring you two more chapters from the book The Mallards and Their Neighbors by Neil Wayne Northey. Today's chapters are 19 and 20, and chapter 19 is entitled Alcyone the Kingfisher Proves a Friend. Let's get right to it.
Now, where do you suppose Ducky Doodles is?
Said Mrs. Mallard as the rest of the fluffy ducklets climbed up the marshy bank in the sheltered little cove. It was about the same time that Billy Coon was crawling into the warm hollow log to go to sleep.
I suppose he got lost in the fuzzy cattails along the sheltered water lane, said Mr. Mallard. I'll go and look for him. You stay right there and watch these fluffy ducklets, and I will go and look for him, said Mrs. Mallard. I can quack louder than you can. I'm going right this minute.
So away hurried Mrs. Mallard to hunt for Ducky Doodles, while Mr. Mallard led the fluffy ducklets to a hiding place along the tumbled bulrushes.
Quack, 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 quack,
called Mrs. Mallard loudly as she swam along the sheltered water lane.
quack, 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 quack.
The Mallards always took the fluffy ducklets for a swim at night because they thought it would be safer in the water than on land. They knew that Trailer the Mink and Billy Coon and Snoop the Weasel and the other night prowlers might get them if they stayed on the land at night. But they did not fear them during the day, and if they were in sight on the water during the day, they knew that Sharptoes, the duck hawk, might see them. Of course, if the fluffy ducklets wanted to play in the water during the day, they could do so in the sheltered little cove where Sharptoes could not see them. But usually the fluffy ducklets were ready to rest a while after playing in the water almost all night. Mrs. Mallard swam almost to the end of the sheltered water lane.
Quack, 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 quack.
She called again, but she had expected to find Ducky Doodles not far away. And although Mrs. Mallard swam here and there and quacked, there was no Ducky Doodles to be found.
I do hope that Danny Muskrat did not find him, she said as she started back to the sheltered little cove. That night, just as Billy Coon left the warm hollow log and started around the duck pond to find the fluffy ducklets, Mr. and Mrs. Mallard and the fluffy ducklets started out to see if they could find Ducky Doodles. The first thing Billy Coon did when he reached the duck pond was to take a bath. Then he walked along the bank in the oozy mud looking for a breakfast. It was a queer time to be eating breakfast, but Billy Coon's breakfast was in the evening, for he had slept all day, while Bud and Mary were eating their supper at that time. Anyway, after a while, Billy Coon came to the sheltered little cove. He could see duck feathers on the marshy bank, and there were many, many ducklet trails in the oozy mud. Billy Coon sniffed around a while and followed the ducklet tracks up the marshy bank to the place where the fluffy ducklets had stayed that night. Aha, said Billy Coon. I have found where the fluffy ducklets stay at last. I can just hunt around in the jungle thicket for tempting berries for a while and then come back after the fluffy ducklets when it's time for them to come ashore.
And away strolled Billy Coon. Now, when the Mallards and the fluffy ducklets reached the end of the sheltered water lane, Mrs. Mallard quacked loudly to see if she could call Ducky Doodles. Far across the duck pond there was a loud quack in answer.
That was Mrs. Spoonbill, said Mrs. Mallard. I suppose we'll swim over and ask her if she has seen Ducky Doodles.
And away swam the Mallards and the fluffy ducklets, with Mrs. Mallard quacking every now and then to let Mrs. Spoonbill know they were still coming. In a little while they could see the Spoonbills swimming toward them. But there were more than just Shoveler and Mrs. Spoonbird. Yes, sir, close behind them were a number of downy spoonbills swimming along as fast as their little web feet could push them. And who else do you suppose was right in the midst of them? Why, Ducky Doodles, of course.
Ducky Doodles, where have you been? Quacked Mrs. Mallard. Oh, Mother, I was lost, said Ducky Doodles. I swam into the tumbled bulrushes to play with the downy spoonbills, and when I came out, I could not find you. Ducky Doodles was very glad to be with his own brothers and sisters again, and after that he was very careful not to leave them. It was a happy family of mallards that started back toward the sheltered water lane that led to the sheltered little cove. They quacked and splashed, and Billy had no trouble at all to hear them coming. Billy Coon was hidden in a clump of tumbled bulrushes right near where the mallards and fluffy ducklets would walk up the marshy bank. It was getting daylight, but Billy Coon thought that he would have time to catch some fluffy ducklets and then hurry back to the warm hollow log in the wood lot, not for another sleep. Billy Coon did not know that the mallards had a friend nearby who was watching him. He thought that he was well hidden in the tumbled bulrushes. Just as the fluffy ducklets were ready to march up the marshy bank, there was a loud noise overhead. It sounded something like a giant rattle, and it was Halcyon the kingfisher. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard called the fluffy ducklets back to the water. They knew that Alcyon's sharp eyes had seen danger nearby. Alcyon had such sharp eyes that he could see fish swimming in the water far below when he was sitting on a high perch, and he had seen Billy Coon. Of course, Billy Coon felt very cheap, and he sneaked away to the warm hollow log, knowing that the mallards would be too smart to be caught like that again. Chapter 20. Ranger the Coyote Meets His Match. Ranger the Coyote lived in a hidden den in the side of a hill far beyond the wide pasture. He liked to live there because the dry hillside grass was just the color of his tawny fur and he could hide easily. Ranger seldom went into his own hidden den himself. He felt that he left that for Mrs. Coyote and their furry little pups. Usually Ranger the Coyote stayed on a high hill where he could see if Fearful the Man came by. Then he would warn Mrs. Coyote. If Fearful the Man saw him, Ranger would run away just out of range of his gun, and there he would sit until he came near, and away he would go again and sit on another knoll until Fearful came near. That was one of Ranger's tricks to rule Fearful the Man away from his hidden den. Sometimes Ranger the Coyote made excursions across the wide pasture and through the green meadow, and came near the grand old house in the hope of finding Old Cluck and her chicklets far enough away from shelter so that he could catch them. Of course, Ranger the Coyote was always careful to make his visit in the evening or early morning, for then he was not so likely to be seen. On the way to the old homestead, Ranger liked to hunt for rabbits and gophers and other things he could carry back to his furry little pups. And so one evening, when the long shadows were stealing out of the black forest and covering the great wide world, Ranger the Coyote left his lookout post near his hidden den and started toward the grand old house. You see, Old Cluck's chicklets were getting quite large, and Mrs. Smith gave them more freedom because she thought they could take care of themselves. Ranger the Coyote had seen them hunting grasshoppers in the green meadow several times, but always they were too near to the grand old house for him to venture to catch one. Or they left and went to their roost before it was dark enough for him to come closer. Or else Nero the hunting dog was watching. No, sir, Ranger the Coyote never had been able to catch one of Old Cluck's chicklets, but he thought that if he kept on trying, that one day he would surely get one. Now it happened that as Ranger the Coyote came to the green meadow, Ringneck the Pheasant came out of hiding for his evening meal. That was just the time that Ringneck liked to catch bugs and grasshoppers and eat clover leaves. Ranger the Coyote knew that it was no easy matter to catch Ringneck the Pheasant. It was not anywhere near so easy to catch Ringneck as it was Old Cluck, for Ringneck could fly away when danger came near if he knew it. But Ranger the Coyote decided that he would try and catch Ringneck anyway. It was still a little too early for him to venture too near to the grand old house. If he failed to get Ringneck, then he could go after one of Old Cluck's chicklets later. Ringneck's parents were foreigners like Hungary and the Partridge. They were brought to this country from far-off China years ago, and for that reason Ringneck was sometimes called the Chinese pheasant. But Ringneck's family has lived here for so long that pheasants are now quite as much at home here as they were in their native land, and they are very good citizens. Ringneck has hatched Ringneck himself was hatched on the old homestead, and he had learned to watch out for Ranger the Coyote and other enemies. But Ringneck thought he might be caught napping. But Ranger thought that he might catch Ringneck napping. Ranger the Coyote hoped that Ringneck would be so interested in finding his supper that he would not be so watchful as usual. And so Ranger ran to the good hiding place as near to Ringneck as he dared to go without being seen, and waited for him to come nearer. He also waited for it to grow darker. Ranger the Coyote is not so good as Reddy Fox when it comes to sneaking up on his game. He is better at catching it in a fair chase like his big brother, Shaggy. Instead of trying to sneak nearer to Ringneck, he simply hid in the grass and waited for Ringneck to come near enough so that he could make a run for him. Nero the Hound had been sleeping on the front lawn near the grand old house. That is, he had been napping with one eye open. Suddenly, he thought he smelled Coyote. The playful air whiffs had danced across the green meadow from Ranger the Coyote straight to Nero's nose. Nero sat up and looked around. For a while he could see nothing, but the playful air whiffs told him as plain as daylight that Ranger was not far away. Nero stood up and stretched. The hair on his back bristled. Down toward the green meadow he trotted, with the playful air whiffs bringing coyote scent stronger and stronger as he went. Soon he was near enough to see Ranger the Coyote watching Hungarian the Partridge. Ranger was so interested watching the partridge that he forgot to look for Nero the Hound. Perhaps he thought he was far enough from the grand old house to be safe. He did not think about the playful air whiffs carrying his scent to Nero. Ranger the Coyote did not see Nero until Nero was almost on him. Ranger started to run away, but it was too late. You should have seen what a thrashing Nero gave Ranger before he got away. Then Nero the Hound trotted back to the grand old house as if he had done his duty, while Ranger the Coyote raced back to the hills where he could hide and lick the wounds that Nero's sharp teeth had made. After that, Old Cluck and her chicklets could feed in the green meadow in safety, for Ranger was glad to stay away. That night, Mrs. Smith gave Nero the Hound an extra good supper, for she had seen him drive Ranger away. She knew that if Nero had not been watching, Ranger the Coyote might have caught some of Old Cluck's chicklets, and so Nero was given an extra dish of mush and milk to pay him for his faithfulness. And that's the end of chapter 20. Tune back tomorrow, and Aunt Nikki will bring you the next 2 chapters from the Mallards and their neighbors. God bless you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.